This is Understanding Ink, the show where you learn exactly what the print journey looks like and how you can make your books even better. I'm your host, Max Flowers, and today we're going to be looking at some zines. So, what really are zines? There's not one single definition, but really they're just kind of any self-published, self-distributed works. They can be about, your personal life. They could have art in them. They could have poetry, photography, all sorts of stuff. And they don't take on one single book format either, as you can see by all the different zines here. Let's have a closer look at some of them. So starting off on the smallest ones, we have mini zines, right? And these are it's one sheet of paper that you fold up, and it's, a little pocket-sized book, and it's got 8 pages in it. They can be 16 pages, they can be 32 pages, just depending on how you cut and fold your paper. And they can be double-sided, so they have that fold-out spread in them. Or they can just be single-sided. But they're just cool little booklets. I use these as like business cards at conventions and zine fairs and stuff. Then you can just produce these en masse. I've made hundreds and hundreds of these for myself and other people. Comix Wellspring even prints these, or you can just have them print flyers and fold them and cut them yourself. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. They can be really, really tiny. This one is Sea Slug Party. Just this tiny little book, right? Like even compared to the mini zine, this is small. And it's got awesome art on the inside of sea slugs partying. They could be really simple and really, really cheap. This is a black and white print on blue paper. And it's the same diamond format throughout with your writing on the inside. There's mistakes. It happens. And they're folded and up and just pocket size, thrown around, tossed around, not perfect, not trimmed. Really cool books you can just make in an afternoon. I've got a whole bunch of these. Here's a Bigfoot Knows Karate one. This one's printed on like a thicker matte cardstock with an inkjet printer. And I took a Bigfoot Knows Karate page and then, a traditional comic page, and then just cut and pasted and reformatted the panels into a little like taster book. And it's got a QR code on the back that'll lead, to bigfootknowskarate.com. But it's one sheet of paper, so it's super, super cheap to make, to produce, to hand out to people. This one's just Silly Cats by a cat fan, right? And at zine fairs, people are handing these out left and right. You go up to a table, you trade mini zines, like that's trading your business card. That's just like a, hey, good luck at the show kind of thing. These aren't meant to be held precious, and that you can be as precious about them as you want, right? Photo collage character art together on purple paper, right? Full bleed stuff. Those are mini zines. Now, a more, I guess, traditional zine is probably 5.5 by 8.5. That's kind of like a standard size, just because it's a half a sheet of paper. So you take one sheet of paper, right? This is one sheet of paper, and then you double side print on it. But this is Rat Brain Zine, done by me and Milo Flowers, and we share it 50-50. And I do some illustrations, and he does some traditional prints and some other stuff. But you have complete control over the process of how you want to make your book. You can do whatever you want with it because you're not confined by any sort of publishing arm or marketing department or editing department or whatever. You can do whatever because you're putting it out yourself, right? So, for example, we laser printed these on off-white parchment paper, and we opted to hand stitch bind our books, which means we have to bone fold every page in half, and then we have to poke 5 holes in the side, and then we use embroidery thread to sew up the book. And that's what's holding this entire book together, is this piece of thread. And we do a different colored thread for each issue of Rat Brain Zine. But they can be, this one's cool. It's a little bit simpler and more standard for a zine. And I say that because it's a half-page zine. It's just a few pages, but it's saddle stitched with a long arm stapler. And you can see the staples on the inside right here. But this one's cool. This one's done by Eli Brandwin. Because it flips. Let's see if we can get, yeah, it flips horizontally. So you read the book horizontally like that. And he's photo collaging art, his own art, over a Xeroxed photo, basically. And he hand numbers and signs these and dates them. So this is produced in 2014, and it's number 28 of 30. So it really is a small run, right? Only 30 of these are made. And that's why, especially like people who have been in the zine field for a really long time, they just have zine after zine after zine, because they're just, little booklets. You can sit down and make these in an afternoon. You just print a few of them and hand them out, see if people like them, and then move on to the next thing, right? Even stuff that's maybe conventionally not considered like a zine or labeled as a zine can still qualify as such. I would consider this sketchbook by Todd Knock to be a zine. It's professionally printed, right? So Todd's not sitting at home with his home printer or going to Staples and copying a bunch of these and hand assembling these himself. He's professionally printing these, but it's still something that he's putting out by himself, self-publishing, organizing, putting everything together for this thing to be made and distributing it himself. He's opted for like a really heavy cover stock on here. It's got a nice gloss finish to it. It's a decent sized book. It's not just 8 pages. And it's printed on like glossy stock. It's pretty thick. It showcases all of his colors well. Yeah, he's doing this in full color. It's full bleed, right? So everything's going off the edge. So this has had to be trimmed by the printer. And yet it's still just got the classic saddle stitch staples or wire right in the center. And that's what's holding this book together. Just like a floppy or whatever kind of zine. It's still following those roots. Going back to the roots of zines are what I consider the roots to be fanzines. Zines came about in the 90s. Well, they really started taking off in the 90s with the Riot Grrrl scene, with especially up in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of people were just making these little books and handing them out at shows and talking about their local punk scene, where you can find the next show, who's doing what, interviews with the bands. And this one is created by Aaron Cometbus, who was a roadie for a lot of the bands in the Bay Area and has traveled all over the world, doing stuff. And he puts these out on a pretty regular basis. I don't know if he's still putting them out, but it's just a black, here's a photo and some black and white basic text. It looks like a book, right? But it's just his own personal writings and stories from his experiences. And I don't know. I don't know if these are professionally printed or if he's hand assembling these. They're each issue of Comic Bus seems to be a different size, at least from my collection. But he's probably just printing these however he can, and I think at one point he had distributions from mail order and subscriptions up to the thousands, right? Which is nothing compared to to conventional comic book shops diamond distribution. So it's still considered a small press run, but he is still self-publishing this stuff. He's doing all of this pretty much by himself. Sometimes he gets help with photography or some art and stuff like that. This is another issue of Comic Bus. I don't know if I mentioned this is saddle stitched, right? And it's about probably 64 pages. So this is another Comic Bus, a later issue about New York cartoonists from when he was living in New York, and it's perfect bound. This is issue number 57. So it's a little bit of a bigger book. I think it's about 100 pages. I don't think he numbers his pages. No, he doesn't. I think I counted once and it was like 100 pages or so. But he's dedicated to doing this himself. I mean, he's lettering his entire intro by hand, and he's got somebody doing illustrations, and the interviewee's text is in basic typeface versus his questions are all written by hand. There's another spot illustration, but it makes for a nice little travel book. This one is, I think, let me grab. See, it's a little bit smaller than a half page, probably because he's doing it full bleed and trimming it. I guess that's a better way. So he's trimming off about 1/8 of an inch to make it full bleed. Really cool books that are just, you can carry around, you can distribute. They're cheap to make, right? But this is another perfect bound zine. And it's also professionally printed. This is a poetry zine by Kelly Jean Janich. And it's got this soft black suede cover to it. Really minimalist front cover design. Back's the same way. Take notice, there's not, on all of these, really, there's not ISBNs or commercial barcodes. Even the one on Rat Brain is just a fake barcode. And it's interesting. It tells you that these are just handcrafted by people to be art books, that they just felt like they needed to make and get out there into the world. But anyways, on the inside, also mention, she left the spine completely black, which is a really interesting design choice that kind of fits with the cover and the back cover, right? But the inside, it's just black and white poetry with some of her sketches and illustration peppered throughout, and dated too, which is cool. But zines can be a lot. It can be an art book, a comic, a poetry book, interviews about your local scene. And you can just do really cool stuff with zines. She went into every book and glued in this lino cut print that she made that accompanies this little spot illustration here. And even that is just telling a unique story within itself. But this kind of stuff isn't in huge publishing arms. You're not going to have somebody go in by hand and glue in hand pulled prints into a book. And in that way, zines are really unique because they are almost a pure vision of what the creator had in mind when they were making making their art. There's so much more to zines. I mean, I've got this little booklet here that's got all sorts of collected zines over my time going to zine fairs and stuff. Here's an instructional mini zine about how to make a scrubby by A Day and Age Zine. You know, notice same book printed on 2 different stocks. You know, here's printed on pink stock, just drawn out on a piece of paper with a Sharpie and photocopied. Photo collage. Even Rizzo printing, which is super popular in zine spaces. Using unconventional inks with neon pink, using old Japanese printers. You know, you can see that there's dry lines or scan lines from it being reproduced. Really cool stuff. There's just so much you can do with them. And I really mean that. Like, there's always ways to innovate on the form and do something new, or, you know, just try out what somebody else has done. Try making your own mini zine with a sheet of paper and learning how to fold and cut them yourself. Make hundreds, bring them to a con, hand them out to literally everybody you see. At the end of the day, right, zines are just about who you are and not having a publisher tell you what you should and should not do, or can and cannot do, and taking that control back into the creator's hands and creators' minds. I hope you learned something today. Let me know if you want to know more about zines or want an in-depth look at any of the books that I've shown here today. And I'll catch you next time on Understanding Ink. Next time we're going to be looking at some manga. So thank you guys and have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.